force Israel into a corner where they would have two options. Either we destroy this entire place and or we occupy Gaza. But the problem is that the Israelis already occupied Gaza. They already tried it and they left for very good reasons. It was economically taxing. It was unsustainable. Israeli soldiers could die. There were RPG attacks on settlements. And I think he understood that he would, the next war, if there were to be a next war, put the Israelis in a position where they would be forced to grope around in the gray for a very, very long time, even if it would appear otherwise from inside, even if it could be sold to the population otherwise. And along these lines, there is another quote, if you don't mind. About a year before October the 7th, don't quote me on this, but I think a year before October the 7th, Sinwar did a speech. And he convened the leaders of his factions and various imams in Gaza. And it's a pretty boring speech and he has no rhythm and he's screaming way too loud. But there's one point that tons of people have cropped and isolated on Instagram. And he has this line and he says, Wallah araha ra'il. He goes I see it with the side of my eyes. It's a regional religious war that will burn with it the green and the dry.
You mean the one we're in right now?
Yeah, the one that will go on for a very, very long time, even if it appears to have ended.
Yeah. So it's like you think that in planning the attacks of October 7th, he saw the long game and understood that it'd be hard for Israel to deal with consequences over time.
I think, to put it a little more specifically, I understood that the status quo that fell into place after 2014, this long silence, that it was poison for the Palestinian cause. Yeah. The notion of resistance. Right. If your cause is that Palestinians should just live, go to work, bring their bread home, then it's certainly antithetical to that. I think he understood that this was poison and that if he continued on this way, what will the next generation say when they didn't grow up with any wars? How long can you go on putting on marches for martyr children with cardboard tanks and fake RPGs? How long can you go on convening your imams to talk about the day after? Who's going to be the next imam of Al-Aqsa after we liberate Palestine? How long can you go on with the platitudes? It can't go on. And the longer you let it go on, the weaker you get. And I think he understood that one thing was certain. You know when you have a snow globe? Shake, flakes fly everywhere. And the one thing of which you can be certain is that the flakes won't fall in the same place. That's the one thing you can know. And I think he understood that like this, it's like 11 of the that whatever will before won't be after. And that's why you call it a bloodbath. You rinse the slate clean.
And it's having or likely to have similar effects to the effects of 9/11 in the U.S. It draws the country into all kinds of unanticipated conflicts that weaken the country and cause internal division within the country.
Yeah.
That'd be best. So to that extent, it's successful. It is strategic and it's effective.
In the short term, it's been successful, certainly. And I think in the long term, I think everyone, especially Israelis, have to wait. You know, there's this quo that dies. And there's this notion in Israel now that status quo died and we established a new one. Meaning they broke the last status quo where we had peace and they had little boxing around every 2 years with Hamas or whatever. But now we're strong. Now we do whatever we want. We bombed them, then we bombed in Lebanon, we bombed Iran. We're in control. But this decide when a new status quo comes into birth.
No. A reason. Call 800-685-5696 or visit AmericanFinancing.net/Tucker. So I want to hear where you think that's going and why it is as dark as it's been in almost 80 years. But back to October 7th itself.
Yeah, sure.
So that you said you thought it was probably in the planning for at least a year. It would have had to have been, just given its scale, I would think.
I think also look in October 2022. This is what the Israelis say. I think they found some kind of binder on the border.
Yeah,
October 2022 on it. But that was the year in which Hamas repaired their relations with the Shia axis.
Yeah,
that's the year in which they had, I think, Haniya going to Moscow.
Right.
They repaired relations with Syria. And that was kind of, I think, the key back into the fold with people like Nasrallah.
Right.
Suddenly you have Islamic Jihad and Hamas are meeting with Nasrallah on a regular basis. I think they were invited to Iran also at a certain point. And I think so those are some pretty serious indications.
But I mean, Israeli intelligence being ineffective as it is to pick up signals this was going on.
That's already been released.
Yeah. So explain, if you would.
I mean, there are people who probably know this benign, but there was a document that's Israeli intelligence called, I think, the Jericho Wall. There was an intelligence analyst, I believe she was a female, who sort of saw what was happening. There were certain military speeches And there's an indication that they were planning something really serious. And the story goes that her higher-ups, I think Rodan Bergman reported on this, if I'm not mistaken. The story goes that her higher-ups basically said, like, yeah, that's cute. It's like inadmissible trash. You had also soldiers at the observation posts along the border who, I don't know when exactly,